chatted when your first CD was
2018
coming out or had just come out, and you talked to me about this project, which is one album a year, which you've pretty much stuck to, even with the pandemic and all of that. This is album number 4 that we're talking about here today.
Yeah, the COVID managed to set me back a couple of years, but this is my 4th, but this is my most difficult and challenging recording project ever, because it's all works that are for solo bass, and they're all contemporary works from the 20th and the 21st century.
And it starts off with this lovely Larry Wolfe suite, you call it?
Yeah, it's a suite. I asked him to write me a substantial piece for solo bass, and he was inspired by J.S. Bach and the solo suites for cello, to write a set of dances for the double bass, but using, the fiddle traditions of Celtic, Scottish, Irish, and Akkadian fiddle music, and rhythms and forms. And he came up with this 5-movement set. He calls it the Blow Me Done set. And Blow Me Done is actually a nautical term that means blow me down. And it's Blow Me Done is a very special place to Larry. It's a place that's in Nova Scotia that means a lot to him. So,
yeah, and just the breadth of style that you go through in all these different pieces, and just the different dance characteristics. It's really compelling music all over the bass, and using some fascinating, like, which is the movement that has all double stops? Is it the Air?
The Air, yeah.
Exclusively double stops?
Yeah, very challenging, because there's, like you say, almost exclusively double stops, and when you're recording, you want to really, nail them, but also be very musical at the same time and say something. And I recorded it at one session, and upon reflection, I thought, I got to do this again, and I did. I had to record it and a second time, and I'm pretty pleased with the way it came out. So,
well, I loved Larry Wolfe. What a player, what a composer, and what an influence on you, because you were his student, and you too have done some composition, and then certainly bringing compositions to light, like you're doing with this CD or with other projects. That seems like Larry was a bit of a catalyst for what you're exploring on the CD.
Yeah, well, when I curate my recordings, I like to have a kind of 3-prong approach, which was to discover, sort of obscure pieces for the double bass, or rediscover works that have sort of fallen out of favor. Then I also would like to do transcriptions of very strong music for other instruments. Although on this CD, there are no transcriptions. Everything is originally for solo double bass. And the third thing is I'd like to commission works from composers, and each CD has a commission on them. And it was just such a natural thing to commission some music from Larry, because he's such a well-respected composer now, having written for chorus, orchestra, concerti, and various kind of chamber music ensembles. And so it was it was my chance to get something quality from Larry.
Well, it's great. I can't wait to see this piece go even more broadly into the world, and other people to play it. And the resonance that this piece captures. I just remember on several of the tracks, like you finish and then you just this like lovely double bass afterglow. So it obviously written very well for the bass, and to take advantage just of the open strings and harmonic. It's obviously all sorts of technical material you're exploring in here, but I just really love the selection of keys and how it captures that resonant quality of the bass.
Well, that's the advantage of having the composer be a bass player as well. I mean, he really knew the instrument, and he can play these pieces. He played some for me, and he showed me a few of the unique techniques and a couple of the movements. And the pieces have, well, the first one is a prelude, and it's not a dance, but it's this incredibly beautiful through composed piece that takes you on really quite a story, with arpeggiation and 2-part writing. I mean, and very strong harmonic motion, and then, like you say, some of the keys he chooses for the other dances, which are binary form. You're able to use select harmonics and open strings when advised.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a resonant set of pieces.
Yeah, just such a great piece and collection of movements and dances, and it's just a great way to start off this album, and then you close out the album with this beautiful piece by a young composer or younger composer who's currently, as we're recording, a student at San Francisco Conservatory, right?
Yeah, he is originally from Arizona, and is a composition student of David Conti at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and he is also a bass player, guitarist, and singer. And he was invited, along with a number of other composition students, to write music for either solo, duo, or trio string instruments for a particular composition department recital. And I was asked to play the premiere of this piece, and after doing so, I just fell in love with it. Thought it was so beautiful and so accessible, and really utilized the bass to a great, to its fullest extent. And it's called "The Earth and Stars," where the opening melodies sort of depict, of the sense of feeling you have standing on the earth and looking up at the stars. And then that same kind of melody is reproduced in harmonics. And so, and the bass is the only instrument that can really sort of, truthfully depict what he's trying to, express, the feeling like the earth and those of us on it contemplating the stars and trying to reach the stars. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great piece, and I really get that feeling. It's one of the wonderful things about bass is we explore that low register, and then we have harmonics actually in a register that we like to listen to. And I definitely got that sort of two-part sort of feeling of the Earth and the Stars. Very well titled, and I think it's the only piece on this album that you're using orchestra tuning for.
I am,
right?
yeah, right, because he did specify some low notes below E.
Mm-hmm.
So I. Particularly a low C, so
Yeah.
I used my orchestra bass for that one.
Yeah, that's a great moment, hearing that extension open up and go all the way down.
Right. Well, it's interesting you say about the two-part writing there, and it's interesting that I note that just now the connection between that piece and two-part, writing, as well as Larry's music, which there are implications and two-part counterpoint projected in his music. And also, if you listen to the Zbinden piece, the homage to Bach, there, he uses, it's a neoclassic treatment of the material BACH, and there's a lot of two-part writing in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, that's a lovely piece too, and a great addition to the album. How'd you settle on that piece?
Well, that was a piece that I knew was used as the competition solo for the Geneva competition in 1973. And when I was studying with Larry, he introduced me to this piece, and so I learned it and I performed it at my senior recital, and then kept it in the back of my mind and thinking that this is really such a strong piece, and haven't heard much of it in recent years. So I thought I'd bring it back to life. And it's written by, Zbinden, Julien Francois Zbinden, and he was such a strong composer, a jazz musician, arranger, and but this piece is not jazz, but it's very, very highly crafted and technically demanding, with double stops and harmonics and two-part writing. And
It's a beautiful piece, and I always find that pieces written to be the competition piece, a lot of the time they're a bit open ended in terms of their interpretation, kind of because the idea was for people to take and sort of run with it and show their musical personality. And I found that some pieces like that really stand the test of time, just because you can kind of bring your artistic stamp to it in kind of a cool way.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So.
And then you got another is Psy. Is that how?
Psy, yeah.
Psy.
Yeah.
Okay, great piece. I think that was new to me, or if I'd heard it before, it was just in passing. But I really enjoyed that. How'd you settle on that?
Well, Luciano Berio, he's one of the most sort of innovative and avant-garde and exploring electronic elements and theater and. And one of the most prolific composers of the 20th century. And he even wrote music like the sequenzas for solo instruments. But this was a very, in contrast, this is a very short, like a minute and a half piece for the double bass. And he titles at the very beginning, a Forte Barocco. So it's a kind of a reworking of infusing an old sort of Baroque style piece with new ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think it's now actually a fairly well-known piece with the younger generation.
Yeah. Bear, what a composer. And I know that Bear, it seems like a lot of my European colleagues seem to explore Berio. And because what else has he written for bass? Is it the
Sequenza?
The big one, right?
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Someday.
But what a cool piece. And not long, like you're describing, but very colorful and a really fun contrast. And then you have the ballade.
Yes.
The
Behzad Ranjbaran ballade, written for commissioned by the International Society of Bassists solo competition in 1999, and I discovered that piece on my own. I know that he had written some music for Eugene Levinson and what have you. It's music that has its roots in sort of 20th century neo-romantic style, but he calls on his roots in the Persian culture of rhythms and scales. And so it really tells quite a story of sort of a somewhat free, but at the same time structured music.
Yeah. And putting this all together, some of this was recorded at the conservatory with really, really talented audio engineer.
My previous 3 CDs I recorded exclusively at the conservatory in the recital hall, which has a fantastic acoustic to record in, but also to perform in. It projects very well there and has a quality sound. But this time I decided I'd record some of these pieces in the new facility in the Bow Center of the conservatory, and it's called Studio G, and it's a very, very large room. And with high-end, microphones, and I had a wonderful recording engineer, Emma Markowitz, and it was such a great space to record in. It really is a resonant and quality sound that you can get there.
Yeah, and this Bow Center is beautiful. If you ever find yourself in downtown San Francisco, if you're at the Symphony, just turn around and look across the street, and you'll see this wonderful facility. And yeah, the tone captured throughout is just really, really lovely. You sound great on it, and I'm just amazed at the velocity of recordings with which you are bringing to the bass world. It's just incredibly cool. And from home bass, well, so you have your first
Walkabout
album.
was the first,
right?
Yeah.
And also I love the imagery that you have for each. You pick a very cool photo for each album. So Walkabout, and then you had home bass,
right?
And then urban bass,
correct,
which was the chamber
focused
recording, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then I switched it up and went solo bass.
Completely solo bass.
And this one's called Basso Novo. Yes.
And
And of course, all of these are available on all the various streaming services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, I've been having a great time listening to it on the new Apple Classical app, which has been a lot of fun, and I'll link up to it on Spotify. And I love this photo. And a mutual friend of ours we were chatting with this morning, he told me to tell you today that he just really loves the photo and thinks it's just such a great expression. And what's the story behind this photo? There's a great story behind the photos you've had for your album. So how did you pick this
Well,
one?
the first one I was my in Walkabout was photographed by a fantastic photographer in the San Francisco Symphony, and it was a photo that was taken for the ISB calendar. So, and it had me sort of on a trail carrying my bass naked, not me naked. The bass was, and that was with the Golden Gate Bridge in the background.
Yeah.
So, giving some sense of where I was located, in San Francisco. And then the home base, I was sitting in my living room, surrounded by 4 or 5 basses, to give you a sense of the variety of instruments that I was using for that recording. And then the third one was urban bass on the roof of the Bose Center in San Francisco Conservatory. But this one, I was enticed to dress up in a white suit and hat and make my way towards Mount Tam.
Nice.
Right. And so this is in Marin County, and it's on a hillside overlooking the ocean. So, and that's how that came about. So, yeah.
Well, it's a lovely photo to accompany a lovely album, and I love this. I love this project, and it's great to bring new music to into the bass world, like with Larry Wolfe's wonderful suite, or to highlight pieces that maybe haven't been played so often. And I've really enjoyed learning about the repertoire that you've had on all 4 of these, and I can't wait for number 5, which I know is coming soon, but it'll have to leave people in suspense for the details on that one. Anything else you want to get out to people about the album? We'll obviously link up to your website. We'll link up to the new album on all the streaming services. You can find all of Steve's other albums. Some of these titles we will have available if you want to learn them yourself.
Yeah, well, we hope to provide PDF versions of Larry Wolfe's pieces will all be done set, which coming to your website soon.
Yep.
Right. And perhaps the Vargas piece as well, the Earth and Stars.
Yeah.
But my hope with these pieces, these commissioned works, is that other bass players will actually understand how significantly musical and inspired that they are, and how well crafted they are, and well written for the bass, as challenging as they are, and hope that they become sort of popular and part of the repertoire in the future.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to dig into this Larry Wolfe piece, and I've had a blast. Working on Kusevitsky, A Whole Step Down, which has so many advantages too, which we've explored, and the other projects you put your energy behind.